Welcome to the ALPINE AgroBite Potassium presentation at the Canadian Spud Conference. This is the second presentation, and I hope you've already caught the first one that we talked about, our phosphorus. KTech is ALPINE's new potassium acetate. It's a unique potassium form fertilizer that is utilized in various applications. It enhances nutrient use efficiencies, elevates stress tolerances, higher crop quality, and greater yield. These plants are composed of over 93–95% oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. It is by giving attention to the other elements and paying important details to them is how we're going to actually improve and increase our yields. In the potato world, we need to pay particular attention to the use of potassium. With so many different application options, we will share how ALPINE supports growers in meeting their maximized yields and quality potential, and where potassium fits into that with our KTech products. The key to fertility is always balance, and balanced fertility means we need to look at all the nutrients in place, make sure that we're not causing antagonism, and we're balancing off our nutrients to increase our plant health and tuber quality. Well, potatoes have a very high demand for potassium, but while we always look at the laws of the minimum, what we need to apply, we need to make sure that we also look at the laws of the maximum and don't apply too much, causing deficiencies or inefficiencies of nutrient usage by our plant. The role of potassium is very important. And as we look in, as it is in all plants, it improves abiotic and biotic stress tolerances, translocation of nutrients and sugars. We look at cell Truger pressures, photosynthetic rates, as well as looking at stalk strength, ionic balance in the cells. But in potatoes, it even carries a bigger demand and importance. When you look at decreased enzyme activity, related to storage discoloration, we're looking at after cooking darkening. How do we actually keep that in play? Improve quality, whether it be size, shape, taste, or specific gravity. Increase tuber numbers, decrease the bruising, and improve skin set are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So what is actually ALPINE K-Tech and how does it work? The potassium acetate-based fertilizer, it's very unique, and it combines a combination of inorganic and organic acids. It improves plant uptake and efficiency over other potassium sources. It's non-corrosive, as we know that this is a product that's used on runways, so we don't want our jets to really come up rusty. It's compatible with other fertilizers as well as crop protections. It carries a low salt index. And we also know that it's going to be used in fertigation, irrigation, and in drip lines. So when we look at the role of acetate within the plants, we're going to look at how the whole potassium acetate that ALPINE puts together works. Indirectly for incorporation into acetyl-CoA, which is a coenzyme A, which helps drive metabolic and physiological reactions within the plants. We also look at how it actually helps with cation balances in cells, and it actually helps produce malates, which are again help with extracts into the soil. Root exudate materials that have direct and indirect effect on acquisition of minerals are very important. So as we increase exudates, we actually look at how we can actually send signals and feed the rhizobium in the soil. We can actually feed the bacteria. We actually feed and make signals to the mycorrhizae so they can actually acquire more phos out of the soil. And we also look at nutrient procurement, through chelation of other nutrients in the soil as well. So I know when you look at it, it's a lot of scientific data, but we need to understand that when we actually have the acetate, it actually affects the citric acid or the Krebs cycle. And I believe it's very important that when we talk to this, we can say, this is how the product works. We're not guessing. We're not just telling you this product works, but we are working within the plant and we're creating some really neat differences that help the potatoes grow to a greater success. So number one is we know that our molecular weight is very small. 98.1 on a scale compared to potassium carbonate at 138 and even potassium thiosulfate, which is 190. That helps us get into the plants and be more efficient. Other factors such as polarity and chelation also adds to the effect. We look at the point of deliquescence. And what that really means is how much moisture does it take to keep it in solution? So when we know it only takes 23.3% relative humidity, if it's foliar applied, we keep in solution longer on the plant so we can actually get through the stomata and the plant can utilize it. But we also turn into soluble nutrients in the soil faster, and with the molecular size plus the ability to be in solution, plants can take the potassium up way more efficiently. We always want to look at salt index. How do we actually keep from burning and causing any injury? So the K technology has a 43.8. It's one of the lowest that we have when you compare it to potassium chloride and even our own ALPINE K-Thio, which is at 50 or at 68. Again, it becomes part of the safety factor. And solubility can really be shown in several ways. It's like how quickly can it get into a plant? How does the plant absorb it and make sure it happens? This study was done in soybeans, but it actually just proves that as the acetate, potassium acetate gets into the soil over 48 hours, it is way more efficient than any other form. So then we know that it's in the plant and it's going to be doing the job that we wanted it to do when it was applied. So we also have to turn and look at what is the other aspect. We look at the getting into the plant, understanding how it works as a potassium source of nutrient, but how do we actually support when it comes to talking about microbial life? Well, actually, the KTech is known as a biostimulant with positive effects on both plants, microbials, and fungicide. You know, we look at mycorrhizae fungi, and they're important for capturing other water nutrients, but they prefer acetate as a food source over glucose. And we know how much glucose there is. I mean, that's the whole process of the photosynthesis energy creating it. This really keys in on that. And when we look at how cell walls, whether they're in plants and structures, they are actually made of flexible polysaccharides, which are just built up cells of chitin, and what we look at, chitin. And a big part you have to understand is that 29% of that chitin is actually acetate as well. So it carries a really massive role within a plant. Here we see, as we talked earlier, to make sure we understand why, when the acetate is in, it actually is a 2-carbon acetate, and it changes into 4 carbons of succinate. This increases the energy speed. It takes 2 steps out so we can actually create energy more efficiently, and we can move ATP into the plant, which in turn allows us to take the malates and put those back into the soil and actually have a way of feeding and signaling the microbiology in the soil. So with KTech, we deliver 3-in-1. You have a source of potassium, you have a source of acetate for the plant, and we have a source of acetate that really works in the microbes with the microbials. So it's key in on this. You have to look at, so how does this actually measure up? So this was work that was done in Texas A&M University, and they show where they put the K technology down, the biomass carbon really increased by a very enormous amount. That meant that we have activity in the soil. From my farmer knowledge, what I did was I actually applied the K20S technology into some lima beans. And we did actual soil analysis and we did biological tests. We found that we increased microbial activity by 13%. We increased bacteria by 15.8. And in turn, that comes back to the active carbon, which is being produced in the soil. Again, and that's the exchange that we use between plants. And it's like your dollar exchange. All this being said, we know that the potassium allows for a much better structure. When you increase your cell structures, you actually are able to increase the size of your phloem and your xylem so you can move nutrients more efficiently, and it becomes better plant health as well. And we know that we want to basically put as much potassium into the cells and into the vacuoles so that we can actually overcome some of the drought stresses that we see. And that being said, we're looking at the water sources, and we know that as the potassium levels go up in the plant, we can see that we actually eliminate the stresses within the plant. We have more water capability, we can stay green longer, and we can actually have the plant be able to function much longer into the evening or through the day as well, and create better photosynthetic energy. When you look at potassium as a removal, we looked at this before too, that, phosphorus is, 69% of the phosphorus that's uptake leaves the farm. Potassium is very close at 68%. So we know not only is it a large user of potassium, but that potassium leaves in with the tuber and the potato as it goes into for our basic food needs and demand for whether it's in fries or chips or table stock as well. So here it just shows that the effect of potassium rates. As you see, as potassium goes up, we know that we're able to assist in maintaining balance between sugars and starches in the leaves, maintains metabolite production, it maintains sugar pressure within the plants, and it affects enzyme activities and starch production. And enzymes, again, just help things function, more efficiently across the board. We also want to make sure that we're not, we're supporting the lack of bruising. Increase potassium levels and a balanced nutrient, decrease percentage of bruising. It also maintains a healthy foliage, so we can actually get through till the end of the season, and we can take it to vine clear, so we can get as much growth as we can out of the plants. This one is a little fuzzy, but what happens is when we look at how does it benefit within the plant, it increases metabolites that regulate pigmentation. That is helping with skin color. It protects skin and barriers. It improves that whole overall look at your potatoes, plus actually the flesh inside. Acetate is also 96% suberin and 4% of the wax that it actually assists with as you're looking for that skin protection and that early skin set. Here, there's a third advantage that we get. It's called value-added potassium fertilizer advantage. And what we see here is that the wheat having potassium added to the phosphorus in wheat, we saw that we had an increase of phosphorus. Therefore, we know that the potassium assists phosphorus uptake, and that's a huge issue when we're growing potatoes. Here you see the 11% in wheat. We also had a 5 to 6% in corn. And again, that advantage is poured into the potatoes, so we can actually use our phosphorus more efficiently. On this relay effect, what we see is we had 20 gallons of a 1034 banded. We actually changed that and we put that into another 8 gallons of in-furrow and replaced that, and we saw the efficiencies there. But when we added the potassium, so we actually took away 2 gallons of the ALPINE starter, added 2 gallons of the K24, it really improved, as we see, the yields and the phosphorus use efficiency as well. So when we're talking foliars, we have to say, so what are the efficiencies? This was taken from California Davis University, and they've done a lot of work on what is 1 pound of foliar versus a pound of nutrient put into the soil. Now you can see here where you've got 1 pound of foliar potassium, it sort of replaces 6 that's in the soil. And the number that's 1 to 20, again, we talked about that in our other slide, is really huge, but you look at what is the phosphorus being tied up in the soil. The other ones I like to look on here is the 1 to 30 for boron. All the micronutrients are so efficient, but don't forget that magnesium one. It doesn't take much magnesium to actually allow more magnesium to be used in your plant. On this slide, this is basically an ad that we put together, and it talks to the efficiency of adding 2 gallons or 8 liters of our ALPINE K24 plus a liter of the F18 Max as a foliar. And this program can be carried out more than once through the season when we're doing tuber fill. But we had some really neat yield advantages, as well as quality. We were really into looking at the hollow heart reduction, and specific gravity was picked up. So there's a real neat advantage here when it comes to putting this into place to not only help with the quality of the plant, but we're going to look at how it helps with the tuber as well. So with 3 foliar applications of ALPINE G241S orthophosphate, we see that in this trial that we are able to increase yield and tuber count. But when we added potassium with that again, we are able to actually extend that into a much greater yield because of the synergies between. So when we look at the yield advantage, we must still take what do we have for saleable products. So 3 years of work done with Wisconsin supported in-furrow quality and shows that we have a better fry with less sugar tips. This is increasing consumer sales for the companies. As we wrap up this presentation, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share some of the ALPINE K-Tech potassium benefits that we've seen. We've covered off a lot of information in very short order, but it's just neat to see how you can actually utilize the potassium products that we have in your potato production. Please get a hold of some of our DSMs, and they'll be really look forward to sharing more of the information of how ALPINE can help you be successful. So again, thank you, and I wish you the most wonderful, healthy, and prosperous 2021 in your potato growing season.